This week, Ofwat and the Environment Agency backed the launch of Let's Save Water, a £75 million campaign asking households to cut daily use by 28 litres. One signal would be unusual. Several signals together are harder to dismiss. The campaign is arriving as England and Wales are being told that ordinary homes use about 140 litres a person each day. Ofwat says treated water is still being lost through leaks at nearly 2,869 megalitres a day. The Environment Agency has warned that future demand could need roughly 5 billion extra litres a day by mid-century. And dry weather is already pulling rivers, farms, reservoirs, and public trust into the same operating picture. But that is not the most dangerous part. The headline is not only that people are being asked to save water. The hidden number is the water that never reaches them. This is not just a water-saving campaign. This is a leakage margin failure. So the question is no longer simply whether people can take shorter showers or turn off taps faster. The question is what happens when lost water reaches the home, the hospital, the farm, the pump station, the river, and the city as missing capacity. Like, subscribe, and comment where you are watching from, because this map is not only showing water use. It is showing where system risk may appear first. At first, the campaign looks like a household message. Turn off the tap, take a shorter shower, fix the dripping faucet. But when you walk into the operating room of the water system, the message changes shape. At the start of this week, Ofwat, the Environment Agency, the Met Office, Natural Resources Wales, and water companies backed the launch of Let's Save Water, a national campaign built around one public instruction: use less water before the shortage becomes visible. The campaign number is simple enough to remember: 28 litres less, per person, per day. But the reason it matters is not simple at all. By the time that message reached households, another signal was already active behind it. According to the Environment Agency, England faces a future public water supply shortfall of about 5 billion litres a day by 2055 without urgent action. That is not a distant technical number sitting in a report. It is a missing daily volume larger than many people can picture. It is enough water to turn a normal dry season into a planning problem, a farming problem, a housing problem, a river problem, and eventually a political problem. On their own, these signals could be treated separately. A public campaign is one signal. A future supply shortfall is another. A dry spring is another. Leakage is another. Reservoir planning is another. Public frustration with water companies is another. But together, they describe one larger configuration. A country is being asked to save water at the same time that its hidden losses are still large enough to rival the savings being requested. That is the first warning light. The dashboard does not begin with a dramatic image. It begins with institutions moving at the same time. Ofwat is not a weather office. It regulates the water sector in England and Wales. The Environment Agency is not a marketing agency. It monitors water resources, rivers, drought risk, abstraction, and environmental pressure. The Met Office is not a water company. It tracks the weather conditions that push demand upward and recharge downward. Natural Resources Wales watches the Welsh side of the system, where rainfall, rivers, ecology, farms, and public supply all meet. When those bodies appear around the same public message, the campaign is no longer just a suggestion to be more responsible in the bathroom. It is an up to signal. The signal says that demand is becoming a controllable variable because supply is becoming harder to guarantee. The visible map is familiar. England and Wales are not deserts. They are associated with rain, grey skies, wet fields, umbrellas, flooded roads, and rivers that swell in winter. That familiarity is part of the problem. A wet country can still have a water shortage if the water arrives in the wrong place, at the wrong time, too quickly to store, too polluted to use, or too scarce during the months when demand peaks. The map shows rainfall, but the system is failing at storage, timing, leakage, and pressure. That is why this day is abnormal, not because a single reservoir is low, not because one hosepipe ban appears, not because one agency publishes one alert. The abnormality is that the official conversation has shifted from emergency response to everyday behavior. People are not being asked to save water only after a crisis becomes obvious. They are being asked before the crisis fully arrives, because the margin is already being measured. The campaign enters the home through ordinary actions. A shower is shortened. A tap is turned off while brushing teeth. A washing machine is filled before it is run. A garden is watered less. A dripping tap is fixed. These are small actions. They sound almost too small for the size of the problem, but that is the point. The system is now looking for water in places that used to seem too small to matter. A litre here, a litre there. A habit changed. A leak repaired. A meter read more often. A shower head replaced. A toilet checked. A garden left brown for longer. A car not washed. A paddling pool not filled. Each action looks minor from inside one house. But the water system does not see one house. It sees millions of repeated decisions stacked across a hot day. That stack is the dashboard. According to Ofwat, average household use in England and Wales is around 140 litres per person per day. The campaign asks for a cut of 28 litres. That is about 1/5 of daily personal use. It is not asking people to stop using water. It is asking them to move the daily baseline. That phrase matters. Move the baseline. Because when a system is under pressure, the peak event is only part of the danger. The baseline decides how much room is left before the peak arrives. A country can survive a hot week if reservoirs are healthy, pipes are tight, rivers are protected, demand is moderate, and emergency capacity is ready. But if the baseline is already high, if leakage is already large, if rivers are already stressed, if public trust is already damaged, then a hot week lands on a system already carrying weight. The weather becomes the visible pressure. The baseline becomes the hidden load. By the same week the campaign was being discussed, the larger water picture had already been shaped by heat and dry conditions. The Environment Agency has reported that its role includes convening the National Drought Group, monitoring water levels, supporting farmers with irrigation guidance, working with communities, protecting wildlife and aquatic habitats, and planning for long-term water security. That list is important because it shows where water stress travels first. It does not stay inside a kitchen sink. It goes into fields, it goes into rivers, it goes into farms, deciding when to irrigate. It goes into fish trying to survive warmer, lower flows. It goes into canal systems, wetlands, and chalk streams. It goes into power stations, food processing, hospitals, care homes, construction sites, schools, and data centers. The campaign begins with a household tap. The system behind it extends into the economy. That is the second warning light. A household sees water as something that arrives when a tap is opened. A water company sees it as a chain of capture, treatment, storage, pumping, pressure, distribution, maintenance, repair, billing, and emergency response. The Environment Agency sees another chain underneath that one. Rainfall enters rivers, aquifers, reservoirs, wetlands, soil, and habitats. Some can be abstracted for human use. Some must remain in the environment. Some arrives too fast and becomes floodwater. Some arrives too late to rescue crops. Some falls where storage is limited. Some passes through old urban drainage and disappears to the sea. Water is not just volume, it is timing. And in a changing climate, timing becomes unstable. The Met Office has warned that the United Kingdom is expected to see warmer, wetter winters and hotter, drier summers as climate change intensifies. That sentence can sound almost balanced, as if winter gives back what summer takes. But water systems do not work like a simple annual bank account. A wet winter does not automatically solve a dry summer if the rain cannot be stored, if aquifers do not recharge enough, if soil is compacted or saturated at the wrong time, if reservoirs spill because they must manage flood risk, or if demand surges during heat. A wet year can still produce a dry warning. That is the detail many people miss. The operating day, then, is not a single day on the calendar. It is a set of conditions layered on top of each other. First, the public is told to reduce use. Second, regulators show that leakage is still a major loss. Third, environment officials warn that future demand could exceed available supply by billions of litres a day. Fourth, climate signals point toward more heat and dry summers. Fifth, the water industry faces low trust because people can see sewage scandals, river pollution, bills, bonuses, and leaks in the same public conversation. That combination changes how a campaign is received. If a trusted system asks for restraint, the public may hear responsibility. If a distrusted system asks for restraint while pipes leak underground, the public may hear blame shifting. That is not a communication problem alone. It is an infrastructure problem with a trust problem attached to it. And trust matters because water-saving campaigns depend on participation before the emergency becomes obvious. People need to believe their saved litres are part of a real plan, not a substitute for repairs that should have happened already. They need to believe that industry losses are being reduced, with the same urgency being asked of households. They need to believe that when they shorten a shower, the water company is also finding the leak under the road. This is not just a water-saving campaign. This is a leakage margin failure. The operational dashboard also shows geography. Water stress does not spread evenly. The south and east of England are often more exposed because demand is high, population density is high, rainfall can be lower, and key water sources such as chalk aquifers and rivers are sensitive to over-abstraction. London and the southeast carry the pressure of housing growth, business demand, old pipes, and heat. East Anglia carries the pressure of farming, dry conditions, and fragile water resources. Parts of the Midlands and the southwest can enter the conversation through reservoirs, rivers, and changing rainfall patterns. But the map should not be read like a simple north-south divide. That would be too easy. The real map is made of local weak points. One town may depend on a reservoir that has not recovered. One village may depend on groundwater. One city may be exposed through old mains under busy roads. One farm may face an irrigation decision during a dry window. One care home may depend on constant pressure for hygiene, cooling, laundry, medication, and dignity. One street may discover the system only when bottled water is delivered to a pickup point. That is how a national warning becomes local. It enters through the smallest dependable thing: a tap, a pump, a pipe joint, a pressure zone, a service line under a road, a storage tank on a roof. The strange part is that most of these components are invisible when they work. Water infrastructure disappears into the background of modern life. It is under asphalt, behind walls, inside valves, inside treatment works, inside billing systems, inside maintenance schedules. People notice it when it fails. They rarely notice it when it is quietly preventing failure. So when a campaign arrives, it appears to be about behavior because behavior is visible. But under the surface, it is also about how much invisibility the system can still afford. That is the third warning light. The day becomes abnormal because the campaign is not only trying to change what people do, it is trying to change when they start caring. Most water-saving messages arrive in the public mind during a heat wave, a hosepipe ban, or a reservoir image. This one is bigger because it tries to build a permanent water-saving culture before the worst shortages arrive. It says the future shortage is large enough that the country cannot wait for emergency announcements every summer. But here is the flip. A culture of saving water cannot compensate indefinitely for a network that loses huge volumes before customers ever touch a tap. The visible action is in the bathroom. The hidden failure is under the road. And the road matters. Beneath it are pipes that must hold pressure every hour, every night, every winter, every hot spell, through traffic vibration, ground movement, aging joints, repairs, bursts, and slow leaks that may not surface for days or weeks. Some leaks announce themselves with water running down a street. Others remain underground, escaping into soil or drains, counted only when flow data, pressure drops, acoustic sensors, or smart meters reveal something wrong. This is where the campaign becomes more than a campaign. It becomes a test of whether the system can measure itself quickly enough, because in water, speed matters. A leak detected late is not only a repair bill, it is treated water already abstracted from rivers or aquifers, already processed, already pumped with energy, already chemically managed, already moved through the network, and then lost. It is not raw rain disappearing in a field. It is finished public supply, leaving the system after the system has paid almost the full cost of making it usable. That is why leakage is not just waste, it is wasted capacity. And wasted capacity becomes dangerous during dry periods because the system cannot simply order more water from somewhere else. It must find it in reservoirs, rivers, groundwater, interconnections, restrictions, demand reduction, repairs, and emergency planning. Every option has a cost. Every delay narrows the margin. By late morning in this imagined operations room, the campaign dashboard would show the public number, 28 litres. The regulatory dashboard would show leakage. The environmental dashboard would show river flows, groundwater, soil moisture, rainfall deficits, and ecological risk. The weather dashboard would show heat, dry spells, and the chance of rain that may or may not arrive where it is needed. The industry dashboard would show demand peaks, pressure zones, bursts, customer contacts, and repair crews. Each dashboard tells a different story. Together, they tell one story. The United Kingdom is entering a period where water security will be decided not only by how much rain falls, but by how much usable water can be kept inside the system long enough to reach the people, places, and ecosystems that depend on it. That is the larger configuration. The campaign is the official signal. The headline number is 28 litres. The abnormal pattern is that households are being asked to create savings, while hidden losses remain large. The mechanism is not yet fully visible, but it is moving. It begins as rainfall that may not arrive at the right time. It becomes a reservoir level, an aquifer level, a river flow, a pumping schedule, a pressure zone, a leak, a repair crew, a public message, a household decision. And somewhere in that chain, a litre of water either reaches the tap or disappears before anyone can use it. That is why the next number matters so much. Because the campaign asks the public to save 28 litres a day, but the system is already losing a hidden number that changes the meaning of every saved drop. The number sounds small enough to ignore until it is multiplied by a country. 28 litres per person per day. That is the headline number at the... According to the campaign backed by Ofwat, the Environment Agency, the Met Office, Natural Resources Wales, and water companies, the average person in England and Wales uses about 140 litres of water a day at home. The campaign is asking people to cut that by 28 litres. In plain language, that means reducing daily household use by about 1/5. It is not a symbolic teaspoon of water. It is not an abstract conservation slogan. It is a measurable slice of the day. It is the shower running a little shorter. It is the tap not running while teeth are brushed. It is the washing machine waiting until it is full. It is the garden not being treated like it lives in a wetter decade. But the strange thing about 28 litres is that it does not feel like a national number when it is held in one pair of hands. A single litre is a bottle, 10 litres is a small bucket, 28 litres is several buckets carried across a kitchen floor. It is heavy enough for one person to notice, but small enough for one household to underestimate. And that is where the number becomes dangerous. Because water systems are built from small repeats. One household is a habit. 1 million households are demand. 10 million households are a peak load. The number is not just water. It is the daily baseline of a country being pulled out of position. This is the first thing the campaign is trying to make visible. Britain does not only have a water problem during a hosepipe ban. It has a water problem every morning, every shower, every flush, every dishwasher cycle, every garden hose, and every unnoticed leak. The campaign number turns the ordinary day into a water map. If one person saves 28 litres, the system barely moves. If 10 people save it, 280 litres remain in the system. If 1,000 people save it, 28,000 litres are not demanded that day. If 1 million people save it, 28 million litres are pulled back from the peak. And if tens of millions of people change the baseline, the household becomes a reservoir without walls. That is why this number matters. It is not because 28 litres will fix the system by itself. It will not. The country still has old pipes, regional shortages, environmental limits, rising demand, population growth, and climate pressure. It still has the hidden disaster of leakage. But 28 litres is the number officials can place directly into the public hand. It is the part of the crisis a household can touch. It is also the part that exposes the rest of the crisis. Because once people are asked to count their litres, they start asking where the other litres are going. That is the part the campaign cannot avoid. A family can understand 28 litres. They can picture it in a bucket. They can feel it in a shower. They can see it in a water butt. But when Ofwat reports leakage in the scale of thousands of megalitres a day, the number stops feeling domestic. A megalitre is 1 million litres. 2,869 megalitres a day is 2,869,000,000 litres a day. That is not a dripping tap. That is a hidden river of treated water, leaving the system before it performs the job it was made to perform. The headline is 28 litres. The real story is what 28 litres reveals when it is placed next to billions of litres. That comparison is uncomfortable because it changes the emotional direction of the campaign. Without leakage, the message is simple. Everyone must do their part. With leakage, the message becomes harder. Everyone must do their part, while the system proves it is doing its part too. That is why the number cannot be read as a moral instruction only. It is an operational measurement. It asks the viewer to look at the distance between household responsibility and infrastructure responsibility. 28 litres is a daily behaviour target. Leakage is a daily capacity loss. Both are measured in water, both matter, but they do not carry the same power. A household can shorten a shower today. A water company must detect, prioritise, excavate, repair, pressure manage, replace, and monitor an underground network that may have been aging for decades. The public number moves quickly, the infrastructure number moves slowly, and when climate stress accelerates, slow movement becomes its own risk. This is not just a water-saving campaign. This is a leakage margin failure. To understand why, imagine the number not as water, but as time. 28 litres saved by one person is a few minutes of demand removed from the system. But millions of saved litres can buy time for reservoirs, pumping stations, rivers, and treatment works. Time is what a water system needs during a dry spell. Time for rain to arrive, time for repairs to catch up, time for restrictions to be avoided, time for pressure zones to stay stable, time for a river to keep enough flow to protect wildlife, time for a farmer to irrigate without pushing an abstraction limit too hard. Time for a hospital to operate without interruption. But leaked water steals the same time from the other direction. A leak does not wait for a heat wave to become active. It runs at night. It runs under roads. It runs while people sleep. It runs while campaigns are printed, while meetings are held, while officials ask the public to save water. And because it is treated water, it has already passed through the expensive part of the chain. It has already been abstracted, cleaned, pumped, pressurized, and delivered into the network. Then it vanishes. The visible number makes the headline. The hidden number writes the damage. The 28-litre target is also unusual because it turns water into a seasonal alarm. In a stable climate, water planning could lean more heavily on the old calendar. Wet months refill the system. Dry months draw it down. Demand rises and falls within expected ranges. But officials are now warning that England faces a public water supply shortfall of about 5 billion litres a day by 2055 without urgent action. The Environment Agency has linked that pressure to climate change, population growth, emerging technologies, and the need to protect the environment. That means the campaign number is not floating alone. It sits in front of a future gap so large that household savings become one part of a much bigger equation. 5 billion litres a day is not a phrase most people can feel. It is too large. So bring it back to the body. If one person is being asked to save 28 litres a day, then 5 billion litres is the daily saving of more than 178 million people at that same level. That comparison is not meant to say households alone must close the gap. They cannot. It is meant to show scale. It shows why reservoirs, transfers, reuse, leakage reduction, efficient appliances, planning rules, industrial demand, environmental protection, and public behavior all start appearing in the same conversation. The future shortfall is not one missing bucket. It is a missing system. The 28-litre number is the doorway into that system. Outside the house, the number becomes pressure. In a normal street, water arrives through a network designed to maintain enough pressure for taps, toilets, boilers, washing machines, businesses, schools, and care homes. Demand is not flat through the day. It rises in the morning when people shower, flush, cook, wash, and leave for work. It rises again in the evening. During heat, demand can rise further as gardens are watered, children play outside, and people wash more often. A system with strong margins absorbs that rise. A system with weak margins watches pressure fall, pumps work harder, repairs become more urgent, and restrictions move closer. 28 litres is therefore not just about water volume. It is about reducing the height of the daily demand spike. A lower spike gives the system more room. A higher spike tests every weak joint. The strange part is that the household never sees most of this. A person opens a tap and water comes out. That is the whole experience. But behind that tap, a control room is watching flows, storage, pressures, bursts, treatment capacity, weather forecasts, customer calls, river levels, and repair crews. The household experiences convenience. The operator experiences load. The campaign is trying to connect those two realities before the connection is forced by failure. But that connection is fragile because water is emotional in a way people rarely admit. It feels basic, it feels owed, it feels like the minimum promise of a modern state. A person may accept saving water during a visible emergency, but they will resist being blamed for scarcity while seeing water running down a road from a burst main. That is why the headline number has a trust problem built into it. 28 litres asks for cooperation. Leakage demands proof. The campaign can tell people that small actions matter. The public can answer that large losses matter too. Both statements are true. The danger comes when one is used to hide the other. The warning does not need exaggeration. The evidence is already enough. Average household use is high enough for behavior to matter. Leakage is high enough for infrastructure to matter. Future shortfall projections are large enough for planning to matter. Climate signals are strong enough for timing to matter. And public trust is weak enough for visible action to matter. That is the real meaning of the headline number. It is not just a target, it is a test of credibility. If 28 litres becomes only a household guilt number, it will fail. If it becomes part of a wider national repair story, it can become powerful. The number will appear outside in quiet ways. It will appear as a shower that ends before the mirror fully fogs. It will appear as a brown lawn that is not treated as failure. It will appear as a dishwasher that waits another day. It will appear as a fixed toilet valve that stops wasting water silently at night. It will appear as a school teaching children why a wet country can still run short. It will appear as a neighbor reporting water bubbling through asphalt. It will appear as a bill, a meter reading, a public message, a repair crew, a reservoir graph, a dry riverbed, and a farmer watching the sky. 28 litres begins in the house, but it does not stay there. It travels outward through the whole water system as reduced demand, reduced pressure, reduced abstraction, reduced treatment load, and reduced stress on the next dry day. And yet, the number also travels in the opposite direction. It points downward, under the street, toward the losses that households cannot fix. That is the twist at the center of the campaign. The public is being asked to hold a bucket, while the network is being asked to stop bleeding underground. The campaign number is small enough to fit into daily life. The leakage number is large enough to expose a national weakness. Between them sits the real question. When the next dry spell arrives, will Britain have saved enough water, repaired enough pipes, stored enough winter rain, protected enough rivers, and rebuilt enough trust to keep the system inside its margin? Or will 28 litres become the number people remember because it showed them how thin the margin had already become? The number people are supposed to notice is 28 litres. The number the system does not want them to forget is much larger. According to Ofwat, leakage across water companies in England and Wales was reported at about 2,869 megalitres a day in the year from 2024 to 2025. A megalitre is 1 million litres. So the hidden number is not thousands of litres. It is not millions. It is billions of litres of treated water lost every day before it finishes its public job. That is the number underneath the campaign, and it changes the whole story. Because when a household is asked to save water, the message enters through personal behaviour. Take a shorter shower. Turn off the tap. Fix a drip. Use a water butt. Run the washing machine only when full. These are real actions. They matter. But while those actions are being counted in litres, the underground system is being counted in megalitres. That difference in scale is where public anger begins. The visible number makes the headline. The hidden number writes the damage. And the damage is not only that water is lost. The damage is that the lost water has already been captured, treated, pumped, pressurized, monitored, and moved. It is not rain falling on a field and soaking into the ground. It is not stormwater running off a roof. It is drinking water that has already passed through part of the national promise. It was supposed to become a shower, a kettle, a hospital sink, a school kitchen, a care home laundry room, a farm washdown station, a restaurant dishwasher, a fire hydrant reserve, or a tap beside a bed. Instead, it disappears into soil, drains, roadbeds, utility trenches, and places no customer can see. That is why the hidden number is more dangerous than it looks. Leakage is not just waste. It is capacity removed from the system, while the system is still pretending that capacity exists. This is the part that makes the campaign uncomfortable. Officials can ask people to save 28 litres because 28 litres lives inside ordinary life. It is simple. It is visible. It can be acted on today. But leakage lives inside buried infrastructure. Old pipe networks, pressure zones, repair schedules, sensor coverage, crew availability, investment plans, and the hard physical reality of digging up roads. A family can change behavior in one morning. A water company cannot replace a century of buried weakness in one season. That does not mean the family action is meaningless. It means the family action sits inside a larger failure of margin. This is not just a water-saving campaign. This is a leakage margin failure. The hidden number changes risk because it removes water before the public even has a chance to waste it or save it. Think about the sequence. First, water is taken from a river, reservoir, or groundwater source. That abstraction must be balanced against the environment because rivers need flow, wetlands need water, fish need oxygenated channels, and aquifers need time to recharge. Then the water is treated so it is safe to drink. That takes infrastructure, energy, chemicals, testing, and staff. Then it is pumped into a distribution network. That takes power and pressure. Then the network must deliver it through mains, valves, service pipes, and local pressure zones. Only after all of that does the household enter the story. Only then can a person turn off a tap or shorten a shower. Leakage cuts into the story before the household chapter begins. It steals from upstream effort and downstream trust at the same time. That is why it is different from ordinary use. If a person uses water, the water performs a function. It cleans, cools, hydrates, cooks, flushes, grows, protects, or supports life. If a pipe leaks underground, the water may perform no public function at all. The system carried the cost. The public loses the benefit. And during a dry year, that distinction becomes brutal, because every lost litre is competing with a real use somewhere else. A litre lost under a street is a litre that cannot stay in a river. It cannot fill a care home washing machine. It cannot dilute pollution in a low-flow stream. It cannot support a farmer during a narrow irrigation window. It cannot help a reservoir hold its level during a heatwave. It cannot be used by a household that has done everything asked of it and still receives a message telling it to save more. But the hidden number is not only about volume, it is also about timing. A leak does not politely run only when water is plentiful. It can run through the night. It can run during a drought. It can run under a road while a heat warning lifts demand above normal. It can run during a hosepipe ban. It can run while people are told not to water a garden. It can run while a farmer watches crops dry. It can run while a water company sends customers a careful email about responsible use. And because much leakage is hidden, the system may not know quickly enough exactly where the loss is happening. Some leaks erupt visibly through asphalt. Those are dramatic. People photograph them. News crews film them. Anger becomes easy because the failure is on the surface. But some leaks are quieter. They move through gravel, clay, old pipe bedding, drains, and voids under pavement. They do not always create a fountain. They create a missing pressure pattern, an abnormal night flow, a meter discrepancy, an acoustic signature, or a patch of ground that should not be wet. The leak may be real long before it becomes visible. That is the sinister part. In water systems, invisibility is not safety. Invisibility can mean the loss has not yet introduced itself. This is why the hidden number affects the first people and systems at the edge of pressure. Not everyone feels water stress at the same time. The first impact often appears where the network margin is already thin. A neighborhood at the end of a pressure zone, a care home that needs constant water for laundry, cleaning, bathing, medication routines, and infection control. A top-floor flat where lower pressure is noticed before the street below understands there is a problem. A small business that cannot operate without reliable washing and sanitation. A school kitchen preparing meals for hundreds of children. A farm with a permitted abstraction limit and a crop that cannot wait 2 weeks for rain. A river reach where lower flow means warmer water, less oxygen, and more stress on wildlife. A household with an elderly person who cannot easily travel to collect bottled water if supply is interrupted. The hidden number reaches them first, not because they caused the loss, but because they live nearest to the margin. That word has to stay in the story. Margin. Water systems do not fail only when the last drop disappears. They fail when the buffer between normal demand and available supply becomes too thin. They fail when there is not enough room for a burst main, a dry month, a heat wave, a repair delay, a power disruption, a contamination incident, or a sudden demand spike. Leakage eats that room every hour. It is a slow emergency disguised as background loss. And because it is always there, people can become used to it. That is dangerous. A constant loss can start to look like a normal operating cost until the weather changes and proves it was actually a hidden weakness. The headline is water saving. The real story is buffer loss. This is also why comparing household savings with leakage is not a simple blame game. It is not enough to say people should do nothing until companies fix every pipe. That would be false, because demand still matters, and dry conditions do not pause for public arguments. It is also not enough to say households alone must solve the problem. That would be false, because private behavior cannot repair hidden infrastructure at national scale. The truth is more uncomfortable. Both sides matter, but they operate at different speeds and different scales. Behavior can reduce peak demand quickly. Infrastructure repair can reduce chronic loss slowly. A resilient system needs both, but the public will not accept both unless it sees both. That is the evidence boundary. The campaign does not need exaggeration. The evidence is already enough. Average household use is high. Future shortfall projections are serious. Climate pressure is growing. And leakage remains large enough to make every household saving message politically charged. That is why the hidden number changes the meaning of the official signal. If a country launches its biggest water-saving push and does not confront leakage openly, the campaign risks sounding like an accusation aimed downward at households. If it confronts leakage honestly, the campaign becomes something more useful. It becomes a shared operating picture. It tells people that their litres matter, but also that the buried network must stop losing the water they are being asked to protect. And this is where the hidden number becomes a model for the future. In the old water calendar, the country could imagine scarcity as an exception: a dry summer, a bad reservoir year, a hosepipe ban, a temporary restriction. Then rain returns, headlines fade, and the system slips back into the background. But a leakage margin failure does not disappear when the first storm arrives. Rain can refill rivers and reservoirs, but it does not automatically mend pipes. A wet winter can raise storage levels, but it does not erase chronic loss. A public campaign can shift behavior, but it does not restore trust by itself. The hidden number remains under the road, under the field, under the billing system, under the official message. And if climate change makes summers hotter and drier, while demand grows and infrastructure ages, that hidden number becomes more important every year. The danger is not only one dry spell, it is leakage repeated through many dry spells. It is loss becoming normal while the margin becomes smaller. It is the public being asked to change faster than the system can repair itself. So the question, after the headline number, is not simply whether people can save 28 litres. Many can. Many already will. The question is whether the system can save its own hidden billions with the same urgency it asks from households. Because when the next hot day arrives, the tap will not care who wrote the campaign. The pipe will not care who approved the investment plan. The river will not care who made the slogan. The care home will not care whether the missing water was lost by behavior or by leakage. It will only know whether water arrives when it is needed. And that is the hidden disaster beneath the campaign. Not that the public is being asked to save water, but that the public is being asked to save water inside a system, still losing too much of it before the saving can even begin. To understand why a leaking water system becomes dangerous, you have to stop imagining a pipe as a hollow object and start imagining it as a machine under pressure. The leak is not just a hole. It is a place where force, age, soil, temperature, demand, and time all meet. The mechanism begins above the catchment, before the water ever reaches a house. Rain falls over hills, fields, reservoirs, rivers, wetlands, and aquifers. Some of it can be stored. Some of it must remain in the environment. Some of it runs off too quickly during heavy rain. Some arrives in winter, when demand is lower. Some is missing in summer, when demand rises. The water that becomes public supply has already passed through a selection process. It has to be available, legal to abstract, clean enough to treat, and close enough or connected enough to move. Then it enters treatment works, where it is filtered, disinfected, tested, and prepared for human use. At that point, water stops being only a natural resource. It becomes an engineered product. It has been captured, processed, and made safe. But it is still not useful until it reaches people. That is where pressure enters the story. A water network is not simply a set of pipes waiting for gravity to do the job. In many places, pumps, valves, service reservoirs, pressure-reducing valves, district-metered areas, and control systems are constantly managing the force that keeps water moving. Too little pressure, and top-floor flats, care homes, schools, and higher ground may not receive reliable flow. Too much pressure, and weak joints, old mains, corroded fittings, and brittle sections become more likely to leak or burst. The system lives inside a compromise. It must push water hard enough to reach the tap, but not so hard that it breaks the route to the tap. That compromise is called pressure management, and in a leaking network, it becomes one of the most important hidden mechanisms in the entire story. The public sees the tap. Operators see pressure zones. A pressure zone is a part of the network where the force of the water has to be kept within a workable range. It is not one pipe. It is a moving balance across streets, elevations, valves, pumps, and demand patterns. At night, when fewer people are using water, flows should fall. If flows stay abnormally high, that can be a clue that water is escaping somewhere. During the morning peak, pressure can dip as thousands of homes use water at the same time. During hot weather, demand can surge even higher. Gardens, washing, cooling, extra showers, commercial use, and outdoor activity pull more from the network. If a hidden leak is already running inside that zone, the system starts the day with less room. The mechanism is simple, but the consequences are not. Water is pushed through a network. Weak points open, pressure carries the loss, demand rises. Operators increase supply or adjust valves to maintain service. More pressure can feed more leakage. Less pressure can reduce leakage but risk poor service. The system is always negotiating with itself. That is why a leak can become a moving mechanism rather than a fixed event. It changes with pressure, soil, weather, repair timing, and demand. It may get worse when the ground shifts. It may grow when traffic vibration stresses a pipe beneath a road. It may widen when an old joint loosens. It may be hard to find because the water follows the easiest underground route, not the route people expect. A leak under a street may not appear directly above the pipe. It may travel through gravel, drains, utility trenches, old ducts, or cracks in the roadbed. By the time water reaches the surface, the actual failure point may be somewhere else. This is why the hidden number is not only hidden from the public, it can be hidden from the system itself, until instruments, inspections, customer reports, acoustic devices, smart meters, or pressure data reveal the pattern. The mechanism begins in physics, but it moves through infrastructure. Pipe age matters because materials change over time. Old iron mains can corrode. Plastic pipes can be affected by installation quality, ground movement, and joint stress. Valves can fail. Service pipes can leak where they connect to the main or enter a property. Repairs can create new stress points if pressure changes or nearby sections are already weak. No water network is perfectly still. It is buried inside a living landscape. Soil expands and contracts. Clay can shrink during drought and swell when rain returns. Roads heat in summer and cool in winter. Construction work disturbs ground. Heavy vehicles pass overhead. Tree roots move through soil. Other utilities share the underground space. Every one of those forces can press on the pipe network in quiet ways. A drought does not only reduce water availability, it can also change the ground around the infrastructure carrying the water that remains. That is the first hidden turn. The dry weather that increases demand can also stress the buried system that must meet that demand. The map shows dry conditions, but the pipe feels movement. When soils dry and shrink, buried pipes can lose support or experience different stresses. When rain returns sharply after a dry period, ground can move again. The network is asked to stay sealed, while the landscape around it changes shape. If the pipe is new, well installed, well monitored, and operating within a stable pressure range, it may absorb that stress. If the pipe is old, cracked, corroded, poorly mapped, or already under high pressure, the same stress can reveal a weakness that was waiting for a trigger. This is how a slow failure becomes visible suddenly. People call it a burst, but often the burst is the public moment of a longer private decay. The crack was forming, the joint was loosening, the pressure was fluctuating, the soil was shifting, the demand was rising. Then one morning, water appears in the road and everyone thinks the failure has just begun. It may have begun much earlier. The mechanism does not stop at the pipe. It moves into the operational day of the water company. A control room sees abnormal flow. A sensor suggests night use is too high. A customer reports low pressure. Another customer reports water in the road. A crew is dispatched. The crew has to locate the leak, isolate the section, manage traffic, dig safely around gas, power, telecoms, and drains, repair the pipe, flush the main, test the water, restore pressure, and communicate with customers. None of that is instant. If the burst is large, some customers may lose supply. If the area includes a care home, hospital, school, or vulnerable customer, priorities change. Bottled water may be needed. Tankers may be arranged. Alternative supplies may be set up. A physical crack in a pipe becomes a logistics problem, a public health problem, a traffic problem, and a trust problem. By the time the leak becomes visible, the system is already carrying load. And this is only the visible failure. The quieter failure is the leak that does not burst dramatically. It simply continues. It runs through the night while the city sleeps. It increases the amount of water that must be abstracted and treated to deliver the same useful service. It raises energy use because pumps are moving water that will never reach a customer. It reduces resilience because stored water is drawn down faster. It can distort the data used to understand demand. It can make a neighborhood look thirstier than it really is. It can push a company to treat more water when the real issue is that too much of the treated water is escaping. In that sense, leakage can create a false picture of need. The network appears to demand more, but part of that demand is not human use. It is infrastructure loss. That distinction matters in a future where every litre has a job. A litre used for drinking has a job. A litre used for hospital hygiene has a job. A litre left in a river has a job. A litre used to grow food has a job. A litre lost through a hidden pipe, failure may have no public job at all. The mechanism then moves into the environment. If more water must be taken from rivers or aquifers to compensate for leakage, the environmental margin can narrow. This does not mean every leak directly damages a specific river in a simple one-to-one way. Water systems are more complex than that. Sources vary, transfers vary, licenses vary, storage varies. But at system scale, leakage increases the amount of water that must be found, treated, and moved to satisfy the same final demand. During wet periods, the system may absorb that extra load with less visible pain. During dry periods, the same loss becomes heavier. Rivers are lower. Aquifers recharge more slowly. Reservoirs are watched more closely. Farmers may need irrigation. Wildlife may face warmer, slower water. The same leak that looked like background noise in winter becomes part of the summer stress equation. This is the second hidden turn. A leak has a season, even if it runs all year. It becomes more dangerous when the rest of the system has less spare capacity. Then the mechanism moves into human behavior. People are asked to save water. Some comply quickly. Some are skeptical. Some change habits for a few days and then drift back. Some cannot save much because they already use little. Some households have medical, disability, childcare, work, or housing needs that make water use less flexible. Some people live in older buildings with plumbing they cannot easily control. Some rent and cannot replace appliances. Some do not have gardens, while others live where outdoor use creates big summer peaks. A campaign treats the public as a population, but the mechanism reaches people unevenly. The person who already takes short showers may feel accused. The person watching a leak run down the street may feel insulted. The person in a care home may not see a campaign at all, but depends completely on the network it is trying to protect. Water saving is simple in a slogan and unequal in a life. That does not make the campaign wrong. It makes infrastructure credibility essential. If households are being asked to reduce demand, companies must be visibly reducing loss. If customers are asked to change daily routines, regulators must show that leakage targets are real. If officials explain future shortages, the public must see investment, repair, and planning moving at the same time. Otherwise, the mechanism of water pressure becomes a mechanism of political pressure. The leak under the road becomes anger above the road. The campaign becomes a symbol of unfairness. And once trust leaks, it is harder to repair than a pipe. The physical mechanism also has a technological side. Modern networks can reduce leakage through district metering, acoustic logging, pressure control, satellite detection in some settings, smart meters, faster repairs, pipe replacement, better asset data, and more precise modeling of flows. But technology is not magic. A sensor can narrow the search. It cannot dig the road by itself. A smart meter can show continuous use at a property. It cannot force a repair instantly. A model can identify a suspicious pressure zone. It still depends on crews, budgets, permits, materials, traffic management, and good decisions. The deeper problem is that water infrastructure is both urgent and slow. When it fails, people need action now. When it is improved properly, the work often takes years. This mismatch is part of the system risk. Climate pressure moves faster than traditional infrastructure cycles. Public outrage moves faster than pipe replacement. A hot spell moves faster than a capital investment program. A burst main can happen in minutes, while the conditions that made it likely may have been building for decades. The mechanism therefore connects three clocks: the weather clock, which can change by the hour, the demand clock, which peaks by morning and evening, and the infrastructure clock, which moves through planning cycles, funding periods, repairs, and replacements. A resilient water system has to keep all three clocks aligned, but the campaign suggests that alignment is getting harder. The weather clock is becoming less reliable. The demand clock is becoming more intense in hot periods. The infrastructure clock is still dragging the weight of the past. This is the third hidden turn. The crisis is not just too little water. It is mismatched timing between nature, behavior, and repair. The mechanism can be followed all the way into one ordinary kitchen. A person opens a tap in the morning. Water comes out because rain fell somewhere, storage held somewhere, treatment worked somewhere, pumps pushed somewhere, pressure stayed stable somewhere, and a pipe under the street did not fail badly enough to interrupt the route. That glass of water is the end of a long chain of successful operations. A leak is a break in that chain before the person ever sees it. A shortage is the moment too many breaks, demands, and limits arrive together. And a campaign is the official attempt to reduce one part of the load before the system has to reveal how thin the rest of the margin is. This is why the hidden disaster is not dramatic at first. It does not need a flood wave, a collapsed dam, or a city-wide failure to matter. It is quieter. Treated water enters an aging network. Pressure finds weak points. Dry ground shifts. Demand rises. Sensors search. Crews respond. Customers are asked to save. Rivers are watched. Regulators count leakage. The future shortfall grows on paper. And beneath all of it, the system is asking one question every hour. Can it keep enough usable water inside the pipes long enough to reach the people who need it? The answer will not be decided by the campaign alone. It will be decided by whether pressure can be managed, leaks can be found, repairs can accelerate, demand can fall, storage can improve, rivers can be protected, and trust can survive the gap between what households are asked to do and what the buried network is still losing. That is the mechanism. It begins with water under pressure. It moves through soil, pipe, valve, pump, meter, street, home, river, and public trust. Then it reaches the most fragile part of all. The belief that when the tap is opened, the system behind it is still holding together. The system becomes real when it enters one ordinary room, not a reservoir, not a regulator report, not a national campaign page. A room. A kitchen, early in the morning, in a small house on the edge of a town in the south of England. Call the person inside Helen. She is 78 years old. She lives alone most of the week, except when her daughter visits after work and when a carer comes in the afternoon. Her house is not dramatic. It has a narrow hallway, an old washing machine, a kettle beside the sink, a small garden that has turned yellow after dry weeks, and a bathroom where the cold tap has always been reliable. That reliability is the quiet contract she has with the world. She does not wake up thinking about abstraction licenses, pressure zones, leakage targets, climate projections, or the difference between a litre and a megaliter. She wakes up thinking about medication, breakfast, the heat in the bedroom, whether she slept well, and whether the carer will arrive on time. The body does not experience water stress as a policy document. It experiences it as a tap that hesitates. That is where the mechanism reaches her. Outside the house, the dry period has already raised demand across the town. More people are showering. More washing machines are running. More gardens are being watered before restrictions arrive. Somewhere under a road, a pipe joint that has been weakening for years is leaking more than it did last season. The water company may see something in the data, a pressure zone that looks wrong, a night flow that does not fall as much as expected, a cluster of customer calls. But inside Helen's kitchen, none of that has a name yet. She turns the tap, and the flow is thinner than usual. Not gone, Not dramatic, just weaker. Enough to notice. At first, she waits. Then she fills the kettle more slowly. That delay is small, but it changes the morning. A stronger person may laugh it off. A busy parent may swear and move on. For Helen, the delay becomes a decision. Does she run the washing machine today, or wait? Does she water the 2 tomato plants in pots by the back door, or let them go? Does she take a full shower, or wash at the sink? Does she call her daughter, or does that feel like making a fuss? Water stress often begins like this, not as a collapse, but as friction added to a body that already has less spare capacity. This is the human pathway. A dry pattern begins outside. It moves into reservoirs, rivers, groundwater, treatment works, pumps, and pipes. It meets a hidden leak. It lowers pressure in a local network. Then it arrives at one tap as uncertainty. The event is visible outside, only if someone is looking at maps. The damage begins inside, when normal routines become decisions. Helen's body does not need a total outage to feel the load. She needs water to take tablets. She needs water to wash her hands more often, because an infection last winter made her more careful. She needs water to clean a small cut on her leg that heals slowly. She needs water to stay cool, because the house traps heat in the afternoon. She needs water to flush a toilet without worrying. None of these uses look excessive. None look like waste. They are the quiet water uses that keep a person dignified and safe. When a campaign says, "Save 28 litres, Helen hears the instruction differently from a healthy adult in a modern flat with efficient appliances and no care needs. She has already saved water for years because her bill matters. She does not take long showers. She does not fill a paddling pool. She does not wash a car every weekend. So when the public message reaches her, it mixes with another feeling. What more is there to give? That question matters because water saving is not evenly available. A household with a lawn, a power shower, multiple bathrooms, and outdoor taps may have easy savings. A low-income household, a renter, an elderly person, a disabled person, or someone already using very little may have fewer safe litres to remove. The campaign sees an average. The body lives at the edge of that average. And the edge is where systems reveal their ethics. If the network loses water before it reaches Helen, and Helen is asked to use less after it reaches her, then the leak has entered her life twice. First, as reduced pressure. Second, as responsibility. This is not just a water-saving campaign. This is a leakage margin failure. The same pathway moves through the carer who arrives later in the day. She has 6 visits before evening. She needs water at each one. She washes hands, prepares drinks, cleans, helps with hygiene, and checks whether people are coping in the heat. For her, water stress becomes time pressure. If the tap runs slowly in one house, she loses minutes. If a supply interruption affects several clients, she becomes part of an informal emergency network. She may need to report the problem, reassure someone anxious, find bottled water, call a family member, or adjust a routine. None of that appears in the headline number, but it is real load. The water system has entered the labor system. A leak under a road has entered a care schedule. A pressure problem has entered the fragile arithmetic of paid time, unpaid worry, and bodily need. The same thing happens at a care home 2 miles away. There, water is not a convenience. It is infection control, laundry, kitchens, medication rounds, hydration, bathing, cleaning, toilet flushing, cooling routines, and staff confidence. A care home does not simply reduce water, used the way a household with a garden might. It can be careful. It can fix internal leaks. It can install efficient fittings. But it cannot stop washing sheets. It cannot stop cleaning bathrooms. It cannot stop helping residents drink in hot weather. If pressure falls or supply is interrupted, the burden multiplies quickly. Staff begin filling containers. Managers call the water company. Families ask questions. Vulnerable residents become anxious because the normal background rhythm of the building changes. The campaign outside says, "Save water." Inside the care home, water is part of clinical stability. This is where the hidden number becomes human. Leakage is often discussed as lost volume, but to vulnerable people, it can become lost certainty. Certainty is a resource too. When a tap works, decisions stay small. When the tap hesitates, decisions grow. Should the care home delay laundry? Should it use bottled water for drinking only? Should a resident with medical needs be prioritized? Should staff spend time managing water instead of spending time with people? The volume lost underground has become a queue of choices above ground. That is what infrastructure failure does. It converts physical loss into human decision load, and decision load is not distributed fairly. It lands hardest on people who have the least room to adapt. The body receives that load before the dashboard does. A healthy person may notice low pressure as inconvenience. A person with kidney disease may notice it as hydration risk. A parent with a newborn may notice it as cleaning stress. A food business may notice it as closure risk. A dialysis unit or hospital may have backup plans, but backup plans are still signs that the normal system is under strain. A farm worker may notice it in a field where irrigation windows are narrow. A school may notice it when toilets and kitchens must keep operating through a hot day. A hotel may notice it when guests complain. A small cafe may notice it when dishwashing slows and hygiene rules become harder to maintain. The same water system runs through all of them, but the pain appears in different forms. That is why the phrase, "people are affected," is not enough. People are affected through routines, through bodies, through work, through time, through dignity, through money, through the small sense that the ordinary world is no longer dependable. Helen does not need to understand the full hydrology of England to feel the chain. She feels it when the shower is weaker and the bathroom stays warm. She feels it when she decides not to wash a set of bedding because the machine uses too much. She feels it when her daughter brings 2 bottles of water just in case. That phrase, "just in case," is one of the earliest signs that trust has shifted. A resilient system lets people live without thinking about it. A strained system makes people prepare for its absence. When enough households begin to think in just-in-case terms, the public relationship to water changes. People store bottles. They watch company messages. They photograph leaks. They argue about bills. They look at brown lawns and wonder whether the sacrifice is shared. The physical shortage becomes social. That social layer can either help the system or break it. If people believe the campaign is honest, they may cooperate before restrictions are necessary. If they believe the campaign hides failure, they may resist even when saving water is genuinely needed. This is why leakage is not only an engineering problem, it is a pathway into legitimacy. A leak under the road can reach the kitchen as weak pressure, but it can also reach the mind as mistrust. Once that happens, every message from the system is filtered through suspicion. The next alert is questioned. The next bill is resented. The next campaign sounds smaller than the leak people remember seeing in the street, and yet, the human pathway does not end in anger. It can also become repair if the system responds visibly. If Helen sees the water company communicate clearly, fix the local burst quickly, support vulnerable customers, reduce leakage, and explain why household savings are part of a wider plan, then the campaign can feel less like blame and more like coordination. The household is not being told to carry the system alone. It is being asked to reduce load while the system repairs its own losses. That distinction is everything. People will accept sacrifice more readily when they can see shared effort. They will accept a shorter shower more readily if the burst main is repaired. They will accept a brown lawn more readily if leakage falls. They will accept a campaign more readily if the hidden number is not hidden. The water itself teaches the lesson. It moves from source to treatment works, from treatment works to pipe, from pipe to home, from home to body, from body to health, from health to care systems, from care systems to public trust. At each point, a small loss can become a larger consequence. A leak is not just water leaving a pipe. It is confidence leaving the system. The weak flow in Helen's kitchen is not a disaster by itself, but it is a warning about how disasters begin in modern infrastructure. Not always with a spectacular collapse. Sometimes with a tiny delay at a tap, a carer losing 10 minutes, a care home filling containers, a daughter buying bottles, a repair crew searching for a hidden break, and a regulator publishing a number too large to ignore. The mechanism outside has entered human life. Now the next question is where it can break the system most easily. Not everywhere at once. Not in every pipe. Not in every home. In one small component that most people never see until it fails. The weak point is not the whole water system. The weak point is a small length of pipe most people never see, buried between the public main and the private life of a home. It may run under a pavement, beneath a strip of grass, through a driveway, or under a street that looks completely normal from above. It has no dramatic shape. It does not look like a reservoir, a dam, a treatment works, or a national control room. It is just a service pipe, a connection, a joint, a valve, a boundary where the large system becomes personal. And because it is small, it is easy to underestimate. That is the mistake. Modern systems often fail through small components that carry large promises. A hospital can be threatened by a valve. A grid can be stressed by a transformer. A city can flood through a blocked drain. And a water-saving campaign can be undermined by an unnoticed pipe under an ordinary street. This is where the hidden disaster becomes visible, not at the national map, not at the press conference, not even at the reservoir. It becomes visible where water is supposed to cross the final distance into daily life. That final distance is the weak point, because everything depends on it feeling boring. When it works, no one talks about it. When it fails, everyone realizes how much of normal life was balanced on a buried connection. Normally, the service pipe has one job: carry treated water from the distribution network into the property with enough pressure and reliability that the user never has to think about the journey. The water has already been captured, treated, tested, and moved through larger mains. The service pipe is not the largest asset in the network, but it is the point where national supply becomes a glass of water, a flush toilet, a shower, a medication routine, a school sink, a cafe kitchen, or a care home laundry room. It is the last quiet bridge between infrastructure and the body. That is why its weakness matters. If a trunk main fails, the event can be large and dramatic. If a treatment works fails, the consequences can spread widely. But if thousands of smaller service connections, local mains, valves, and pressure zones are old, leaky, poorly mapped, or hard to inspect, the system can lose water continuously without looking like a single disaster. It becomes a distributed failure. No one pipe explains the whole crisis, but together, the small weak points create a hidden drain on the country's usable water. The weak point is not only the pipe material, it is the conditions around it. A buried pipe lives inside soil that moves. It sits under roads that vibrate. It shares space with gas lines, power cables, telecoms, sewers, tree roots, old trenches, new construction, and the accumulated improvisations of decades. It is affected by pressure from inside and ground movement from outside. During dry weather, some soils shrink. During wet weather, after a dry period, they can swell or shift again. A pipe that was stable in one season can be stressed in another. A joint that held for years can begin to seep. A tiny leak can carve a path through the ground. A slow loss can become a burst. The failure may be small at first, but the load passing through it is continuous. Water is not a static weight. It is moving under pressure every hour. That pressure finds weakness, the way wind finds a gap in a window. Quietly at first, then relentlessly. This is why a water network is vulnerable in a different way from a reservoir. A reservoir can be inspected from the surface. Its level can be photographed. Its decline can be shown on television. The public can understand a low reservoir because they can see emptiness, but a service pipe fails invisibly. It can lose water under a road without changing the look of the street. It can send water into soil, drains, cavities, or nearby underground pathways. It can make the system work harder while the neighborhood looks calm. This is the dangerous part of buried infrastructure. The absence of a visible emergency does not mean the absence of damage. It may only mean the damage has not surfaced yet. When the current campaign asks households to save 28 liters a day, The service pipe becomes a moral and technical boundary. On one side, the household is told to reduce demand. On the other side, the network must reduce loss. Between them sits a connection that can either preserve trust or destroy it. Imagine a family shortening showers, waiting to run the washing machine, letting the garden go dry, and teaching children to turn off the tap. Then imagine that same family walking outside and seeing water bubbling through asphalt for hours. The campaign may still be scientifically correct. Saving water may still be necessary, but the credibility of the message changes instantly. The family is no longer only thinking about conservation. It is thinking about fairness. Why am I being asked to save a bucket when the road is losing a stream? That question is not irrational. It is the human response to a weak point becoming visible. The system depends on the answer. If the water company locates the leak quickly, communicates clearly, repairs it visibly, supports vulnerable customers, and explains how leakage is being reduced, the weak point becomes a repair story. If the leak sits unresolved, if information is vague, if customers receive generic saving messages while the street is wet, the weak point becomes an accusation. Infrastructure failure turns into public anger. The service pipe is no longer just a technical asset. It becomes a symbol of whether the system is serious. The operational chain after a weak point fails is longer than most people imagine. First, the leak must be detected. That may happen through customer reports, acoustic monitoring, pressure data, district meter readings, smart meters, night flow analysis, or visible water at the surface. Then the location must be narrowed. Underground water does not always appear where the pipe has failed, so the surface clue can be misleading. Then crews must be assigned. Permits and traffic management may be needed. The site must be made safe. Workers must avoid other utilities. The failed section must be exposed. The pipe must be repaired or replaced. The main may need to be flushed. Water quality may need to be checked. Pressure must be restored gradually, so repairs do not create a new problem elsewhere. Customers must be updated. If supply is interrupted, bottled water or alternative supply may be required. If vulnerable people are affected, the response becomes more urgent. A small weak point under the street can pull in engineers, customer service teams, public health precautions, traffic control, emergency logistics, and local politics. This is the system expansion hiding inside a pipe joint. A leak is never only the escaping water. It is the response chain it forces into motion. During a normal period, that response may be absorbed. During a dry period, it competes with other urgent work. Crews may be handling multiple bursts. Demand may be high. Reservoirs may be under observation. Rivers may already be stressed. The company may be under pressure from regulators and the public. The same repair that would be routine in a wet month becomes more consequential when the system is short of margin. That is why weak points matter most when conditions are already loaded. A small crack during a period of surplus is maintenance. A small crack during a dry, hot, high-demand period is capacity loss at the worst possible time. The first people affected are often not the people with the loudest voice. They may be residents at the end of a pressure zone, people in higher floors, people with medical needs, people who cannot easily carry bottled water, schools with toilets and kitchens to run, a care home with laundry and bathing schedules, a small food business that cannot safely operate without reliable water, a household where an elderly person depends on a carer who has limited time. These people do not experience the weak point as infrastructure theory. They experience it as a morning routine becoming uncertain. A tap runs weak. A toilet refill slows. A washing machine is postponed. A kitchen cannot prepare as planned. A manager starts calling for updates. A daughter brings bottled water just in case. That phrase returns again because it is one of the earliest signs of system stress. Just in case means confidence has already started to move out of the pipe. The service pipe also exposes a deeper tension in how water systems are governed. Responsibility can be divided between companies, property owners, landlords, regulators, and local authorities. In some places, The public water company is responsible for certain parts of the network, while property owners may be responsible for parts of the supply pipe on private land. To a customer, that boundary can feel absurd during a failure. The tap is weak, the water is missing, the bill is real. But the question of who owns the failing segment can slow understanding, action, or trust. Boundaries that make sense on asset maps can feel meaningless in a kitchen. The water either arrives or it does not. The body does not care which side of the legal boundary the pipe failed on. The care home does not care who drew the asset line. The farmer does not care which department manages the form. In a crisis, administrative boundaries are tested by physical need. That is why the weak point is not only hardware, it is also information. Does the company know where its pipes are? Does it know their condition? Does it know where leakage is rising? Does it know which customers are vulnerable in the affected zone? Does it know how pressure changes in one area affect another? Does it know which repairs are temporary and which are permanent? Does it know whether a saved litre from the public is being preserved inside the system or lost through a known weakness? Infrastructure without accurate information becomes harder to defend. A pipe can be buried. Data cannot be allowed to stay buried with it. According to Ofwat, leakage reduction is one of the performance areas water companies are expected to improve, and the sector is under pressure to cut losses further during the current investment period. That matters because leakage targets are not just bureaucratic benchmarks. They are an attempt to restore margin. If leakage falls, the system does not have to find as much extra water to deliver the same service. Pumps move less wasted volume. Treatment works carry less unnecessary load. Rivers and aquifers may face less pressure at the system scale. Customers may see a more credible link between their behavior and company action, but targets only matter if they become physical change. A target does not stop a leak. A spreadsheet does not seal a joint. A public commitment does not restore pressure in a weak zone. The weak point demands excavation, detection, maintenance, replacement, and persistence. There is another reason the service pipe matters. It is close enough to the customer to shape perception. People may not understand reservoir operations, abstraction rules, climate projections, or long-term supply planning, but they understand a leak in the street. They understand low pressure. They understand being told to save water while seeing water wasted. The local weak point becomes the public's evidence. It may not represent the entire network statistically, but emotionally, it becomes the whole system. That is powerful and dangerous. One visible leak can make a national campaign look hypocritical. One fast repair can make it look serious. One clear update can preserve trust. One unanswered report can corrode it. The map shows water scarcity, but the system can fail at credibility. This is the part officials cannot solve with a slogan. Public cooperation depends on visible reciprocity. A household can accept being asked to save water if it believes the system is also saving water. A community can accept restrictions if it sees leaks repaired and rivers protected. A vulnerable customer can accept inconvenience if support arrives quickly and communication is honest. But when the weak point is ignored, every future message carries the stain of the last failure. The leak becomes memory. The memory becomes resistance. Resistance becomes lower participation. Lower participation raises demand. Higher demand increases stress. Stress exposes more weak points. This is how a small technical problem becomes a feedback loop. The weak point under the road also connects to the larger future. Climate change does not need to break every pipe to threaten water security. It only has to reduce the margin around existing weaknesses. Hotter, drier summers can increase demand. Wetter winters can deliver water at times when storage and flood management are complicated. Intense rainfall can run off instead of recharging groundwater. Dry soils can shift. Population growth can add demand. New housing can add pressure to local networks. Data centers, industry, agriculture, and energy systems can increase competition for reliable water. In that future, small losses matter more because spare capacity is harder to assume. The service pipe that was once just a maintenance issue becomes part of climate adaptation. This is the inversion at the heart of the story. The biggest water-saving campaign asks the public to change behavior at the surface, but the most important test may be underground. Can the buried network hold the water that society is being asked to protect? Can local pressure zones remain stable when demand spikes? Can weak pipes be found before they become bursts? Can customers see repairs moving faster than slogans? Can regulators make leakage reduction feel real rather than abstract? Can the system prove that every saved litre has somewhere safe to stay? If it cannot, then the campaign becomes trapped. People save water, but trust leaks. Officials publish targets, but streets stay wet. Companies promise investment, but customers remember interruption. Dry spells pass, but weak points remain. The event will not need to become a national outage to matter. It can remain local, repeated, uneven, and corrosive. A leak here, low pressure there, a care home warning, a school disruption, a road repair, a farmer delayed, a river stressed, a household angry. Each one small enough to be explained away. Together, they form the hidden pattern. The weak point is not the whole system. The weak point is the place where the system stops being invisible. For decades, water infrastructure has depended on invisibility as a sign of success. Pipes underground. Treatment out of sight. Pressure unnoticed. Repairs completed before most people know. But the new water reality makes invisibility harder to maintain. A country facing future shortfalls, climate pressure, and public distrust cannot afford hidden losses to stay hidden. The service pipe, the valve, the local main, the pressure zone, the small buried connection. These are not minor details anymore. They are the narrow places where national resilience either holds or breaks. And that leads to the historical question. Has a version of this already happened before? Has a dry period already shown Britain what happens when weather, demand, infrastructure, and public trust collide? The answer is yes. The evidence is not imaginary. It is written in past droughts, past restrictions, dry rivers, emergency planning, and summers, when the system learned that rain in a wet country is not the same as water security. This is not speculation. A version of this mechanism has already left evidence behind. Britain has already seen what happens when dry weather stops, behaving like a background condition, and starts moving through reservoirs, rivers, pipes, farms, households, emergency powers, and public trust. The clearest memory is still 1976, the year that turned drought from a weather story into a national operating problem. According to the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, the drought of 1975 to 1976 is considered the most severe experienced across much of the United Kingdom, with wide water resource and ecological impacts. It did not arrive as one shocking day. It built slowly, season after season, through dryness that accumulated until the country discovered that rain in the national imagination was not the same as water in the system. That distinction matters now. The danger in 1976 was not only that it was hot, it was that the water system had been pushed out of its normal rhythm for long enough that emergency measures became part of ordinary life. Restrictions appeared, public messages multiplied. In some places, the idea of dependable household water became less certain. Parliament passed the Drought Act 1976, giving authorities emergency powers to restrict non-essential water use. That legal response is important because it shows the moment when drought stopped being only a natural event and became a governance problem. Weather had reached law. The lesson from 1976 is not that today is the same. It is not. The population is larger now. The water industry is organized differently now. Monitoring is better. Data is better. Drought planning is more advanced. Leakage management has improved compared with past decades. The Environment Agency has said that since 1976, England has avoided the extreme restrictions, such as standpipes, that marked the worst memories of that period, partly because of investment and resilience planning. That difference matters. History should not be used lazily. It should not be treated like a prophecy. But history can show the shape of a mechanism before it returns in a different form. In 1976, The mechanism was prolonged dryness, moving through storage, rivers, public supply, agriculture, ecology, law, and behavior. In the present story, the mechanism is water stress, moving through the same chain, but with newer pressures attached. Hotter summers, higher demand, aging buried infrastructure, public mistrust, and the hidden daily loss from leakage. The old drought revealed that a wet country can run short. The current campaign reveals that a wet country can also lose treated water before the public ever gets to save it. That is the crucial difference. In 1976, the public memory is often standpipes, dry grass, cracked earth, and emergency restrictions. In the current moment, the public image may be a campaign poster beside a leaking road. The older failure was scarcity becoming visible. The newer failure is credibility becoming fragile before scarcity is fully visible. Both are connected by margin. In a healthy water system, margin is the space between what people need and what the system can deliver. In a drought, that margin shrinks because supply falls and demand rises. In a leaking network, that margin shrinks because usable water leaves the system after treatment. When drought and leakage exist in the same operating picture, the system is squeezed from both directions. Less reliable natural input, less reliable engineered delivery. That is not the same as saying one cause explains everything. It does not, but it does show why past droughts matter. They teach that water security fails through accumulation, not just shock. A second precedent arrived much closer to the present. In 2022, England experienced a hot, dry summer that the Environment Agency describes as an example of a short and intense drought. Drought was declared in multiple areas of England in August of that year. Hosepipe bans returned in several regions. Rivers were stressed. Farmers faced difficult irrigation decisions. Households were asked to change behavior. The country again learned that water scarcity does not wait politely for one official category to satisfy every definition. It appears through restrictions, low flows, crop pressure, reservoir concern, and messages telling people that ordinary use now has system consequences. The UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology compared that dry summer with earlier drought episodes and noted that some river flows were pushed toward the edge of the 1976 benchmark. Again, the point is not that 2022 became a copy of 1976. It did not. The point is that the mechanism was familiar. Dryness moved from weather into water resources, then into policy, then into kitchens, gardens, farms, and public anger. The similarity between 2022 and the present campaign is not only drought, it is timing. By the time a hosepipe ban arrives, the public has already entered the story late. Reservoir levels have already been watched. River flows have already fallen. Rainfall deficits have already accumulated. Companies have already prepared drought plans. Regulators and agencies have already been talking. The official announcement is often the public face of a process that began quietly months earlier. That is why the new campaign matters. It tries to move the public earlier in the chain. It asks people to reduce demand before emergency restrictions become the main language. But that effort creates a new requirement. If the public is being brought earlier into the water system, then the public will also see earlier the parts of the system that do not make sense. They will see leakage. They will see sewage scandals and river pollution in the same mental frame. They will see bills, bonuses, repairs, drought warnings, and campaign slogans together. The system cannot ask people to enter the control room and then hide the loss under the floor. This is where the precedent becomes sharper. Past droughts showed that restrictions are socially sensitive. They are not just technical tools. They change how people feel about fairness. A person may accept not watering a lawn when they see a reservoir low and a river struggling. But if they see water running down a road, the restriction feels different. The physical rule becomes a moral question. Who is saving? Who is losing? Who is responsible? Who is being asked to carry the burden? In 1976, emergency measures made scarcity visible. In 2022, hosepipe bans made regional pressure visible. In the current campaign, leakage makes responsibility visible. That is the new precedent line. Drought does not only test supply, it tests legitimacy. A third piece of evidence comes from the official language now being used around future drought. The Environment Agency explains that droughts are natural events that reduce available water supplies and can affect people, wildlife, and the environment. It also says that England will likely experience more frequent and severe droughts because of climate change. The House of Lords Environment and Climate Change Committee warned in 2026 that England is on course for a public water supply deficit of about 5 billion litres a day by 2055 without mitigation. These are not phrases from a disaster movie. They are institutional warnings. They tell us that drought is no longer being treated as a rare inconvenience that can be managed only when it arrives. It is being treated as a regular risk that must be planned around. That changes the role of leakage. In a future where spare water is harder to assume, leakage is not just a performance failure. It is adaptation capacity being lost. This is why the historical comparison must be careful. The United Kingdom is better prepared, in some ways, than it was in 1976. It has more monitoring, more drought planning, more environmental regulation, better forecasting, more network data, and decades of operational learning. But the country is also exposed in ways that are different from 1976. Population has grown, demand patterns have changed, climate signals are stronger, environmental expectations are higher, public tolerance for pollution and leakage is lower. Digital infrastructure, healthcare, food supply, and modern households all assume reliable water more completely than ever. A modern water outage does not only mean inconvenience, it can mean school disruption, care home vulnerability, business closure, hospital stress, and public health concern. The old drought tested a country with older expectations. The new drought risk tests a country that has made water reliability invisible, and then built almost everything on top of that invisibility. That is the part the precedent reveals. Modern vulnerability is not always created by weakness alone. Sometimes it is created by success. Because water normally works, people have stopped organizing life around its absence. Because taps usually run, homes no longer store much water. Because water systems are expected to be constant, care schedules, hygiene rules, workplaces, and food businesses depend on continuity. Because drought plans exist, people may assume extreme measures will remain historical, but history warns against that comfort. It shows that when conditions align for long enough, the system can be forced into options it would rather avoid. The difference today is that the forcing can arrive through a compound pattern: dry weather, high demand, environmental limits, leakage, aging pipes, public distrust, investment delays, regional inequality. The event may not look like 1976 because the system it moves through is not the same, but the operational question is familiar. How much margin remains before ordinary life has to be reorganized around water? There is also an ecological precedent that cannot be left outside the story. Drought does not only affect customers. It affects rivers, wetlands, groundwater-dependent ecosystems, fish, insects, trees, and soils. The UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology has described the ecological impacts of the 1975 to 1976 drought as wide-ranging. The Environment Agency's modern drought management language repeatedly connects water supply with the need to protect wildlife and the environment. This matters because public supply is not the only claim on water. A litre left in a river can be life support for an ecosystem during low flow. A litre abstracted for treatment has to be justified against that environmental need. A litre then lost through leakage is doubly painful because it was removed from the natural system but did not deliver the intended human benefit. In a dry period, that matters more. The leak is not just between company and customer. It sits between river and tap. This is the hidden historical continuity. Past droughts made people focus on what came out of the sky. Present drought planning forces attention to what happens after the water is captured. In 1976, The shock was that the country could run short after months of abnormal dryness. In 2022, the shock was that a modern country still had to impose restrictions and watch rivers suffer during intense heat and low rainfall. In the current campaign, the shock is that the country is asking households to count litres, while a much larger daily loss remains buried in the system. The mechanism has evolved, but the pattern is recognizable. Scarcity becomes operational before it becomes fully visible. Then, once visible, it becomes political. The lesson not yet absorbed is that water security cannot be communicated as a seasonal inconvenience. It has to be governed as a year-round system risk. A wet winter is not enough if storage is inadequate. A public campaign is not enough if leakage remains too high. A drought plan is not enough if vulnerable customers do not receive support quickly. A future reservoir is not enough if current rivers are already stressed. A leakage target is not enough if people keep seeing unrepaired bursts. A household saving message is not enough if the system cannot prove that saved water will stay in the network. History does not say the future must repeat the past. It says the future will punish the same blind spots if they are carried forward. That is the proper use of precedent, not panic, not nostalgia, not a claim that standpipes are inevitable. The evidence line is more precise than that. Britain has already experienced drought severe enough to reshape law and daily life. It has recently experienced drought conditions severe enough to trigger regional restrictions and ecological concern. Official bodies now warn that future supply deficits could reach billions of litres a day without mitigation. Leakage remains large enough to challenge public trust in any conservation message. These facts do not prove a single outcome. They reveal a system pattern. And the pattern is this. Water crises build in layers. First, the weather shifts. Then the resource margin shrinks. Then infrastructure weaknesses matter more. Then behavior is requested. Then fairness is questioned. Then public trust becomes part of the operating system. By the time the crisis is visible in a tap, road, river, or restriction, the deeper mechanism has already been moving for months or years. That was true in older droughts. It was visible again in recent dry summers, and it is now echoing through the biggest water-saving campaign the country has launched. The past is not telling Britain exactly what will happen next. It is telling Britain where to look before the next dry spell turns a hidden weakness into a public failure. The pattern is larger than a dry summer, larger than a campaign, and larger than one leaking pipe under one street. By this point in the story, the official signal has already done its first job. It has made water visible before the emergency becomes unavoidable. But the deeper pattern is not about visibility. It is about timing. Britain's water system was built around an old expectation of seasons. Rain would come often enough. Winters would refill enough. Summers would draw down enough. Demand would rise, but within a familiar range. Rivers would recover. Groundwater would recharge. Reservoirs would cycle through known patterns. Pipes would age, but maintenance could chase them gradually. The calendar was not perfect, but it was usable. Now that old calendar is being tested. This is not only a water-saving campaign, it is a calendar failure, an infrastructure test, and a public trust warning arriving through the same tap. The country is not simply asking whether people can use less water this week. It is asking whether a system built for one climate, one demand pattern, and one level of public patience can function inside another. The Met Office has warned that the United Kingdom is moving toward warmer, wetter winters and hotter, drier summers, as climate change reshapes the national weather pattern. That phrase is often repeated, but it is easy to misunderstand. Warmer, wetter winters do not automatically cancel hotter, drier summers. A water system does not live on annual rainfall alone. It lives on capture, storage, recharge, timing, river protection, treatment capacity, pipe integrity, and demand control. If rain falls heavily in winter but rushes through catchments too quickly, it may increase flood risk without creating enough secure summer supply. If soil is already saturated, extra rain may run off. If rain falls in the wrong region, it may not help the areas under the strongest demand. If reservoirs must balance water storage with flood risk, They cannot simply hold every storm. If aquifers need slow recharge, intense rainfall may not enter the ground efficiently. A wet winter can still be followed by a summer shortage. That is the new pattern. The country can look wet on the annual chart and still be dry in the operating room. The old calendar assumed recovery. That is the key word. Recovery. A dry summer would end, rain would return, rivers would rise, reservoirs would refill, public attention would move on, restrictions would be lifted, the system would breathe again before the next load arrived. But the question now is whether the recovery window is shrinking. What happens if winter rain comes in heavier bursts, but not in the form most useful for recharge? What happens if spring begins dry and warm, pulling plants, soils, and people into higher water demand earlier than expected? What happens if summer heat lasts longer? What happens if the next dry spell arrives before the system has fully recovered from the last one? The danger is not only the peak number. It is the interval between peaks. A system can survive stress if it has time to reset. It becomes fragile when stress repeats faster than repair, recharge, and trust can rebuild. This is where leakage becomes part of the climate story. Leakage is not climate change by itself. Old pipes can leak in any climate. Poor maintenance can waste water in any year. Bursts can happen in wet or dry weather. But climate pressure changes the meaning of leakage. In a period of surplus, leakage can be treated as an expensive failure. In a period of narrowing supply, leakage becomes lost adaptation capacity. Every litre lost through a pipe is a litre that cannot remain in storage, remain in a river, reduce abstraction, support a farm, supply a care home, or help a city through a peak day. The same leak becomes heavier when the system has less room. That is the system pattern. Climate does not need to create every failure. It only needs to remove the margin that once made failures survivable. The Environment Agency has warned that England may need around 5 billion additional litres of water a day by the middle of the century if demand continues and urgent action is not taken. That number forces the future into the present. 5 billion litres is not one missing reservoir in the imagination. It is a daily gap made from population growth, climate pressure, environmental protection, industrial use, household demand, and new forms of water consumption. It means water security cannot be solved by one tool, not by campaigns alone, not by reservoirs alone, not by leakage reduction alone, not by meters alone, not by transfers alone, not by telling people to be careful, not by blaming companies, not by blaming households. The future gap is a system gap, and system gaps require multiple pieces moving together. Demand must fall, leakage must fall, storage must improve, rivers must be protected. Planning must account for water limits. Agriculture must adapt. Homes must become more efficient. Industry must understand its own water footprint. And the public must be told the truth early enough to act before crisis language takes over. But there is a harder question underneath all of that. Can the response system move fast enough? Water infrastructure operates on long cycles. Reservoirs take years. Pipe replacement takes years. Planning reform takes years. Large transfers take years. Environmental recovery takes years. Public trust can be damaged in one summer and take years to rebuild. Climate pressure does not wait politely for those cycles. A dry spring can arrive this year. A heat wave can arrive next month. A burst main can happen tomorrow. A public campaign can be launched quickly, but the physical system behind it changes slowly. That mismatch creates overload. Not always physical overload at first. Institutional overload, communication overload, maintenance overload, regulatory overload, customer service overload. The system must manage today's demand while building tomorrow's supply, repairing yesterday's pipes, and explaining all of it to a public that is no longer willing to accept vague reassurance. The new baseline is not one dramatic disaster. It is a higher level of background attention. Water used to disappear from public thought when rain returned. Now it may not disappear so easily. People will remember leakage numbers. They will remember dry rivers. They will remember hosepipe bans. They will remember bills. They will remember sewage controversies. They will remember being asked to save 28 litres while seeing water on the road. That memory becomes part of the operating system. A campaign in the future will not arrive on neutral ground. It will arrive on soil already shaped by previous warnings, previous failures, previous promises, and previous anger. Public memory can either strengthen resilience or weaken it. If people believe the system is learning, memory helps. If people believe the system is repeating itself, memory becomes resistance. This is not only a water supply issue. It is a coordination issue across society. Housing growth depends on water availability. Farming depends on seasonal water and predictable rules. Energy systems use water for cooling, processing, and operations. Data centers and new technologies may increase localized demand. Hospitals and care homes require dependable supply every day. Schools require sanitation. Rivers require flow. Wetlands require protection. Construction requires planning. Food processing requires clean water. Fire services require pressure and availability. Tourism and recreation depend on healthy water bodies. The water network sits quietly beneath all of these systems. And when it tightens, they tighten with it. That is why a leak is not only a leak. It is one small removal of capacity from the shared foundation under the economy. The future risk will not spread evenly. It will shift by season, region, and system. Seasonally, the risk may move earlier into spring if dry weather begins before summer demand peaks. It may continue later into autumn if heat lingers and recharge is delayed. It may appear in winter not as shortage, but as a missed opportunity. When heavy rain arrives too fast to store and too intense to recharge groundwater properly, regionally, the south and east of England may face sharper pressure because population density, agricultural demand, lower rainfall, and sensitive water sources overlap. But no region should assume immunity. Local weak points can matter more than broad maps. A northern town can have an old main. A Welsh catchment can face ecological stress. A Midlands community can depend on a vulnerable supply zone. A coastal area can face saltwater intrusion, concerns in some groundwater contexts. A fast-growing suburb can strain a local network even if the national rainfall map looks comfortable. The risk is national, but the failure will often be local. By system, the risk may first appear where flexibility is lowest. Care homes cannot simply turn off water use. Hospitals cannot treat water as optional. Food businesses cannot ignore hygiene. Farms cannot move crop water needs to a more convenient month. Rivers cannot negotiate with abstraction. Low-income households may already have limited room to reduce use. Renters may not control plumbing upgrades. Elderly people may not be able to collect bottled water. Schools cannot function normally without toilets and kitchens. The same campaign instruction lands differently, depending on how much choice a person or institution has. That is why the future water strategy cannot be built only around average consumption. Averages are useful for planning, but vulnerability lives in exceptions. The average person may be able to save 28 litres. The vulnerable person may already be using water carefully and still be at risk if the system fails. The old preparation calendar also needs to change. Drought planning cannot begin when lawns turn yellow. It has to begin in winter, when storage decisions are made, when groundwater recharge is assessed, when leakage reduction plans are reviewed, when farmers plan crops, when vulnerable customer lists are checked, when communication systems are tested, when repairs can be prioritized before heat raises demand. Summer water stress is often built in the previous seasons. That is the hidden time lag. By the time the public hears the loud warning, the quieter decisions may already have shaped the outcome. Did enough winter rain enter storage? Did aquifers recharge? Were known leaks repaired? Were pressure zones stabilized? Were customers warned early? Were rivers protected before flows fell too low? Were farmers given clear guidance before the irrigation window narrowed? Preparedness is not a summer event. It is a year-round operating discipline. The campaign points toward that discipline, but it cannot become a substitute for it. A national water-saving message can reduce demand, raise awareness, and create a shared vocabulary. But if it is not tied to visible leakage reduction, stronger infrastructure planning, river protection, and honest regional risk communication, it will become thin. People will sense the gap. They will ask why they are being asked to change, while the buried system still loses so much. The answer cannot be defensive. It has to be operational. Here is the demand we need to reduce. Here is the leakage we are cutting. Here are the pipes being replaced. Here are the pressure zones being improved. Here is how vulnerable customers will be protected. Here is how rivers will be kept alive. Here is what is uncertain. Here is what we cannot promise. Here is why action now prevents worse choices later. That kind of honesty is not weakness. It is resilience. The system pattern also includes a psychological threshold. People do not react only to risk. They react to perceived fairness. If a drought plan asks everyone to share burden, but the public sees companies wasting water or polluting rivers, cooperation falls. If a company repairs leaks quickly and shows progress, cooperation rises. If regulators publish clear data and enforce consequences, trust has a chance. If officials overstate certainty or minimize visible failure, trust falls. In water security, trust is not decorative, it is functional. Demand reduction depends on it. Emergency compliance depends on it. Long-term investment acceptance depends on it. Water bills depend on it. Planning decisions depend on it. Trust is a form of infrastructure. It carries cooperation the way a pipe carries water. And like a pipe, it can leak. This is the larger echo of the campaign. The public is being asked to treat water as finite before scarcity fully announces itself. That is a cultural shift. For generations, British water anxiety was often about too much water. Floods, rain, damp, storms, rivers, overtopping banks. But the future asks the country to hold two truths at once. Too much water can arrive in winter storms. Too little usable water can remain in summer. Flood risk and drought risk can grow inside the same climate pattern. A wet country can flood and still face shortages. That sentence feels contradictory only if water is imagined as a simple quantity. It is not. It is timing, storage, quality, pressure, location, ecology, and infrastructure. The old mental model is failing. The new one is more demanding. And beneath this new model sits the question of recovery. Can rivers recover between low flow periods? Can aquifers recover between dry seasons? Can reservoirs recover between demand peaks? Can repair crews catch up between bursts? Can companies replace enough pipe before climate stress exposes more weaknesses? Can regulators push improvements without making bills unbearable for vulnerable households? Can households reduce demand without feeling blamed for failures they did not cause? Can public trust recover before the next campaign arrives? These are not separate questions. They are the same question asked at different points in the system. Does the system still have time to recover before the next load arrives? That is why the current campaign should be read as more than a public information effort. It is a signal from the future. It shows that ordinary behavior is now being pulled into water security planning. It shows that leakage can no longer hide as a background industry metric. It shows that climate adaptation is not only seawalls, flood barriers, and emergency alerts. It is also toilets, taps, washing machines, pressure valves, service pipes, meters, reservoirs, chalk streams, care homes, farms, and the public belief that saved water will not be wasted underground. The campaign is trying to move the baseline. The leaks reveal how hard that will be. The event itself will pass. The posters will change. The weather will shift. Rain will return. Some rivers will rise. Some reservoirs will refill. Demand will fall after heat eases. But the system pattern will remain. A country built around old water assumptions is being tested by a climate and infrastructure reality that no longer follows the old calendar. The future will not be decided only by how much rain falls. It will be decided by whether the system can capture it at the right time, store it in the right place, move it through pipes that hold, protect the rivers it comes from, reduce the demand that strains it, and rebuild the trust required to make shared action possible. The campaign asks for 28 litres. The future asks for something larger. It asks whether Britain can stop treating water scarcity as an interruption and start treating it as a system pattern already moving toward the next dry day. The warning does not need exaggeration. The evidence is already enough. That is the line this story has to hold, because water risk is too important to be turned into a simple scare. Not every weak tap is caused by climate change. Not every burst main is caused by drought. Not every shortage warning means a city is about to run out of water. Not every leak is the result of negligence. Pipes age, ground moves, demand changes. Repairs take time, weather varies. Water systems are complicated, and honest analysis has to leave room for complexity. But complexity is not the same as comfort. The facts already point in one direction. A major water-saving campaign is asking households to reduce daily use. Ofwat reports that leakage in England and Wales remains a large daily loss. The Environment Agency warns that England faces a public water supply shortfall of about 5 billion litres a day by 2055 without urgent action. The Met Office says the United Kingdom is moving toward hotter, drier summers and warmer, wetter winters. Those facts do not prove one disaster. They reveal one narrowing margin. That margin is the real ending of the story. Not panic. Margin. The space between demand and supply. The space between a dry week and a restriction. The space between a leak and an outage. The space between a campaign and public trust. The space between a river that can recover and a river that cannot. Water security is decided inside that space long before the public sees the full crisis. By the time a tap hesitates, the chain has already been loaded. By the time a hosepipe ban arrives, the dry pattern has already moved through rainfall, soil, reservoirs, aquifers, rivers, operations, and public messaging. By the time a burst main appears on a road, the pipe may have been weakening for years. The event becomes visible at the surface. The damage begins earlier. So what is related and what is not? The current water-saving campaign is related to long-term demand. It is related to the gap between how much water people use and how much the system can reliably provide in a hotter, more crowded, more water-intensive future. Leakage is related because it removes treated water from the system before it reaches useful work. Climate change is related because hotter, drier summers can raise demand and reduce the reliability of summer supply, while heavier winter rainfall does not automatically become stored, usable water. Public trust is related because demand reduction depends on cooperation, and cooperation depends on visible fairness. But it would be wrong to say every local pipe failure is directly caused by climate change. It would be wrong to say household savings are meaningless because leakage exists. It would be wrong to say leakage alone explains future shortages. It would be wrong to say the campaign proves that catastrophe is inevitable. The evidence does not need those shortcuts. The real risk is stronger without them. It is stronger because it is ordinary. It lives inside repeated numbers, repeated losses, repeated dry spells, repeated repairs, repeated public messages, and repeated doubts. A country does not need to become a desert to face water stress. It only needs the timing of water to become less reliable, demand to keep rising, infrastructure to lose too much, rivers to need protection, and trust to thin at the same time. That is the compound signal. The danger is not one variable. It is the alignment of several variables that used to be treated separately. This is not just a water-saving campaign. This is a leakage margin failure. That sentence should not be heard as an accusation against households. It should be heard as a description of where the system is now being tested. Households matter. A shorter shower matters when millions of people do it. A fixed toilet leak matters. A washing machine run full matters. A garden watered less during a dry spell matters. Demand reduction can buy time. It can reduce pressure on treatment works, reservoirs, rivers, and local networks. It can lower peak load on hot days. It can delay or reduce the need for harsher restrictions. The campaign is not wrong to ask people to act, but household action cannot be used as camouflage for infrastructure loss. If the public is asked to save litres, The system must prove that saved litres are not disappearing underground. That is the evidence boundary that matters most. Both things can be true. People use water in ways that can be reduced. Companies lose water in ways that must be reduced. The country needs new supply in some places. It also needs lower demand. It needs better storage. It also needs healthier rivers. It needs investment. It also needs trust. Anyone who turns this into only one side of the story is making the system harder to understand. The water crisis is not a single villain story. It is a system story. And system stories are uncomfortable because responsibility is distributed, but consequences are concentrated. The consequences concentrate in the body first. In the elderly person whose tap runs weakly during a hot day. In the care home trying to maintain hygiene and laundry during low pressure. In the farmer watching an irrigation window narrow. In the school that cannot function without toilets and kitchens. In the small restaurant whose hygiene depends on reliable water. In the river where low flow raises temperature and reduces oxygen. In the repair crew digging through a road while customers ask why the leak took so long to find. In the household that has shortened showers and still sees water running down the street. These are not dramatic scenes in isolation. They are points where the hidden mechanism touches real life. Water stress rarely arrives as an abstract national shortage. It arrives as a changed routine. The campaign began with a number, 28 litres, a number small enough to fit into daily life, but large enough to become significant when multiplied across millions of people. Then the story moved underground, into the leakage number, into treated water lost before use, into pressure zones, service pipes, joints, valves, soil movement, and repair schedules. Then it moved through a person, a room, a care routine, a weak tap, and the feeling of uncertainty that arrives before failure is complete. Then it moved outward again into history, showing that Britain has already learned, more than once, that a wet country can face water stress when the calendar turns against it. And finally, it reached the system pattern, a future where rainfall is not enough unless it is captured, stored, protected, delivered, and trusted. That is where the future echo sits. The event will pass. This campaign will not remain new forever. The weather will change, rain will return, reservoirs will rise in some regions, public attention may move on. People will stop thinking about litres for a while. Headlines will chase another crisis. But the thing revealed by the campaign will remain. A system built around old assumptions is being tested by a world no longer following the old calendar. Winter rain does not guarantee summer security. Annual rainfall does not guarantee local supply. A national average does not protect a vulnerable street. A public slogan does not repair a buried pipe. And a saved litre is only as secure as the system that keeps it inside the network. The future will not be decided only by the peak number. It will be decided by recovery. Can the rivers recover before the next dry spell? Can aquifers recharge before the next hot spring? Can reservoirs refill before demand rises again? Can repair crews reduce leakage before the next peak day? Can regulators force progress fast enough? Can companies rebuild trust visibly enough? Can households reduce waste without feeling blamed for failures they did not cause? Can care homes, hospitals, farms, schools, and businesses plan for water stress before emergency language begins? Can the system still recover before the next load arrives? That is the question the campaign leaves behind. And it is a harder question than whether one person can save 28 litres. One person can. Many people can. But the water system is not saved by one bucket. It is saved by the alignment of millions of buckets, thousands of repairs, long-term investment, honest regulation, better data, protected rivers, efficient homes, and public trust strong enough to hold during restrictions. It is saved by treating leakage not as background loss, but as lost resilience. It is saved by treating demand not as private habit only, but as national load. It is saved by treating climate not as a distant explanation, but as a pressure already changing the timing of water. There is no need to say that disaster is certain. Certainty is not required. The risk is visible without it. The official signal is already there. The headline number is already there. The hidden number is already there. The weak point is already under the street. The precedent is already in the record. The system pattern is already forming. What remains uncertain is not whether water will matter more. It will. What remains uncertain is whether the response will arrive before the margin thins too far. So return to the opening image. A public campaign asks people to save water by the litre. A regulator counts leakage by the megalitre. An environment agency warns of future shortfall by the billion litres. A weather office describes seasons shifting away from old expectations. Somewhere below a quiet road, treated water moves under pressure through a pipe no one notices until it fails. Somewhere above it, a person opens a tap and expects the modern world to appear. That expectation is the real infrastructure, not the pipe alone, not the reservoir alone, not the campaign alone. The expectation that clean water will arrive whenever ordinary life asks for it. Every modern routine is built on that assumption. The shower before work, the drink with medication, the washing of hands, the cleaning of a wound, the school lunch, the care home laundry, the farm decision, the hospital sink, the restaurant kitchen, the fire hydrant, the river left with enough flow to stay alive. Water is not only a resource in that system, it is the quiet permission for normal life to continue. And that is why leaks are the hidden disaster. Not because they are spectacular, because they are the opposite. They are ordinary enough to be ignored, constant enough to be normalized, and large enough to matter. They turn treated water into missing capacity. They turn public campaigns into credibility tests. They turn dry weather into a sharper threat. They turn the space under a street into a national question. The campaign will ask people to look at their taps, but the deeper story asks the country to look below them, under the pavement, under the road, under the old calendar, under the assumption that rain means security, under the belief that a wet country can always afford to waste water before it is used. That belief is ending. The next dry spell may not announce itself as a catastrophe. It may begin as a familiar message, a warm forecast, a low-flow report, a garden left unwatered, a repair crew on a street, a care home checking its contingency plan, a household saving 28 litres, and a hidden leak still running through the night. The future will be shaped by whether those signals are treated as separate inconveniences or as one operating picture. Because the water system does not fail only when the tap runs dry. It begins to fail when the margin is treated as infinite. It begins to fail when hidden losses are tolerated because they are underground. It begins to fail when households are asked to change but cannot see the system changing with them. And it begins to recover when every litre is given a job. Every leak is treated as lost resilience. Every warning is explained honestly. And every saved drop has a real chance to remain in the system. The event will pass. The signal will remain. The question is whether Britain hears it as a temporary campaign or as the first clear sound of a water future that has already begun.